Hey everybody, and welcome to week 2. I hope that you enjoyed week 1 and getting to know each other and a little bit about the course. I also hope that you enjoyed learning about the theoretical foundations of organizational communication, which really ties strongly to organizational management as well, because it's through communication, of course, that rules and structures are enacted, and that's what employees kind of find themselves working within and or around, because sometimes in organizations we work within a bureaucracy or a certain structure, but then we also through our informal connections work around it, and that's all done through communication. So hopefully kind of like the seeds of that idea were planted in what you learned last week, and then this week is really going to be a continuation of that. So we started out last week with the classical theories of organizational communication, such as scientific management, bureaucracy, and we're now looking at more humanistic approaches, such as human relations, human resources, and then even some more postmodern approaches, such as systems and cultural approaches. So each of these different approaches, of course, they're not like mutually exclusive. They're not like one is so completely separate from the other that both could never exist in the organization, although in any given organization you'll usually see one kind of predominant approach over the other. However, the progression of them, they did develop in a somewhat linear fashion, although there was a lot of overlap in their development as well, and you can probably tell that by the dates provided for each of the approaches in your textbook. But they really kind of represent a growing awareness of the value of employees, and really kind of the value of creating organizational structures where employees have more room to collaborate with each other as well as give feedback. So one of the big knocks that everybody puts on bureaucracy is that a lot of times there are a lot of unnecessary levels, and that can lead to a lot of bottlenecks in communication. And so the human relations approach, from a mindset point of view, starts to get around that, if not a structural point of view. But then human resources approaches, which really emphasize that kind of cross, rather than just top-down organization, but that cross-lateral and even upward communication. That's where we start to see structurally organizations really realizing the value of employee input. And then systems approaches, of course, kind of like take into account the external part of the organization and the fact that, as we touched on in chapter 1, no organization exists as a silo, right? Every organization is interdependent on other organizations in its industry, in its geographic area, and so on. So there's government regulations that affect organizations, there's competition that affects organizations, there's supply chain issues that affect organizations, and so all these kind of work together, and that's really what systems approach looks like. So then cultural approaches looks at the importance that culture plays in organizational communication, or in organizational life, but arguably cultural approaches could not exist without communication, because it's, again, through signs, symbols, rituals, and so on that we kind of develop these cultural approaches. So that said, that is what you're delving into this week, a more humanistic view of organizational life and organizational communication. And again, probably in your own jobs, and I know some of you even mentioned experiences that you had in the past in your introductory discussions, in terms of how they inform kind of either what you want to learn in this class or the way you want to interact with within organizations in the future. And even if you haven't had that experience in the workplace, certainly you've had to work in teams and groups in your academic career. And so these are all kind of different issues that are kind of dealt with in this week's readings. So I didn't have a chance to completely grade everything. I've only kind of gotten a little bit into it, but it was nice to meet all of you in the discussion, and I do aim to have feedback to you guys by tomorrow and Wednesday. Throughout the week, each of you will be getting different feedback on different assignments. I do leave comments in each of the assignments and or discussions, and if I see any themes that are arising from what you're all writing, I'll be sure to touch on them either next week or sometime this week, just so that some of the assignments that you hand in, only I see, as opposed to the discussions where you're discussing with each other. So if I see something kind of like some great ideas coming out in the activities that other people don't see, I'll make sure that I bring them up so that you can all know what each other is thinking. And that is it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and have a great week.